since we've had Coffee Talk. So we're so happy to have this.
Any of these meetings?
All right, one last time, guys. You got to keep yourself on mute, and if that can't happen, then we'll have to get the bouncer to take some corrective action. Okay, so we need you guys to stay on mute. Thank you very much for that. All right, so while we were going to have Coffee Talk this morning, we're going to look ahead to next week, Monday morning, 9 o'clock. PAR President Chris Rad will be joining Stephanie for the next session of Coffee Talk. So we hope you will join us for that. In addition to that, we want to remind everybody about Code of Ethics. This is a reporting year for everyone. We've been messaging out to all of membership across all of our various platforms. If you've already completed your Code of Ethics and haven't passed along your certificate of completion, please get that to Donna at GPAR.org. If you have any questions about Code of Ethics, Donna is your go-to. In addition to that, we're going to be having a live virtual training for Code of Ethics next month, June 23rd. We hope you will consider joining us. We understand that maybe the NAR website to do Code of Ethics is not the best option for you. You need something where you're interactive. We're going to present that opportunity for you next month, and we're going to have some more of those as the year goes on. But the thing is this, that deadline is December 31st. Take care of it now if you can. The NAR website where you can go ahead and do it. Once you start it, you have 30 days to complete it. So you do not need to do it all in one sitting. So there's lots of ways to go ahead and make that work for you, but take care of it now, cross it off your list and get it done. Finally, if you missed yesterday's workshop, we have the recording of that. I'm going to drop that into the chat so you can check out that link. And it was a really great presentation by Janice Benstock. She's from our board of directors, and she was talking about how to improve your offer for your buyers in this crazy market. So it's worth it. Check it out. It's about 45 minutes in length, and you can watch it at your leisure from our YouTube library. So with that, Stephanie, good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Matt. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We have a great coffee talk today with Dr. Jessica Lautz. She is with NAR. She is the Vice President of Demographics and Behavioral Insight, and she's going to help us find answers to some of our questions we have about the consumer and how that's changed over the past year, filled with pandemic, teetering economy, and what we learned and what's going to happen next. But before we get started, Jessica, if you're there, let's introduce you to our members and get to know you a little better. Let's start off with just telling us a little bit about your position at the NAR.
Yeah, so I've been at NAR since 2007, which was a crazy time to join NAR. Not as crazy as today, perhaps. We definitely have a different inventory crisis today. I will say my position is really interesting because I get to oversee and look at all of this incredible data that we get from members, from surveys that you guys get from us, from focus group data, and then also from consumers. So it's a really unique position because I can really try and get into the heads of what in the world is going on with consumers, and how they are changing and how their demographics have been changing as well. So it's a very, very cool position, and I love it.
Yeah. So how did you get involved? Was this something you always did, or?
So I moved around to a couple nonprofits in DC, looking at education research first. And then I landed at NAR, and I fell in love with real estate. I've done some work on student loan debt as well. So it kind of merges into the real estate sector because we know that student loan debt is a huge hurdle for buyers right now, to be able to enter the market. So there was some crossover between the old nonprofits and where I am now. But yeah, I really, truly love it.
That's awesome. Okay, so one more question before I turn the floor over to you. Why is it important for us as realtors for data, and what should we be looking at, especially in this market today?
Yeah, so I think it's really interesting. So I guess there's a couple of different approaches. A lot of the folks in the department that I work in, they look at like the big macro economy and they say, okay, what's going on with jobs or what's going on with GDP? And those things are incredibly important because if you don't have a job, you're probably not going to be able to buy a house unless you're in a very sweet position. So when I'm looking at the data, I'm looking at what decisions are consumers making? How are they working with their agent? What do they want out of their agent? Um, I'm looking at things like how are marriage rates changing? How are birth rates changing in this country? Those are going to be drivers of who needs a home today, what they need out of a home, and how that's going to actually impact down the road as well. Are they going to move as quickly? Probably not if they don't have a kid in their house. So things like that, I think can be very helpful to the agent. When you're the boots on the ground, you're working with these consumers. And so just talking to them about these decisions can be really helpful.
Awesome. All right. So I'm looking forward to your presentation. So go ahead and people, if you have questions, please put them in the chat. We'll get to them at the end of the demonstration here.
Awesome.
All
Thank you. All right. So I am going to share my screen. I talk better with PowerPoint. I am happy to hand my slides over to you. So don't feel like you need to furiously take notes while you're drinking coffee and probably driving a car too. So please don't do that. I am 100% happy to answer questions. I love answering questions actually, because I think I learn a lot about what you guys are dealing with right now and what struggles you may be having. So let's chat as well. So 14 months later, where in the world are we? I will say, I think we're all kind of in a pressure cooker situation. We've been here for 14 months. We feel the pressure of family life right now, of the anxiety of going back to normal, or maybe excitement of going back to normal. I think there's the introverts out there like, oh my God, I have to see people again and maybe take a shower and take off the sweatpants. And the extroverts are like, oh my God, roaring 20s, here we are. So I think there's definitely a split, but this is impacting the home as well. Because we have to understand how our home has changed completely in the last year and how that's working for us. I think the other big decision that a lot of people are grappling with at this exact moment of the pandemic is CEOs are deciding, what in the world am I going to do with my employees? They've successfully worked at home, many of them. Much of the workforce has been able to bring their laptop home, or I'm technically in the Poconos right now. My home base is in Arlington, Virginia. I work out of the DC NAR office, but my house is being remodeled because I needed it to work better for me. So right now I'm perched on a on a little table in the Poconos in a bedroom, and I'm loving it because I can be here. But a lot of CEOs are going to say, now is time to be back in the office, and you're not going to have the opportunity to do that. And as they are grappling with that, people are going to move and they're going to say, I need a new place. And so we see all of this incredible demand, that buyer demand that's out there, but the inventory is not there. And you guys know that. I don't need to repeat that. But this really is a very, very unique market. On a national scale, we have the highest home sales in 14 years. We have record lows that we keep breaking the records of list time to contract time. And this is a national scale of 20 days. I know in some markets, in some zip codes, that's laughable. It's really like a day. We also have record low month supply. We also have record low month supply, and real supply is actually lower because the month supply numbers that we're reporting on a national scale includes pending contracts. So it's just going to be lower because we know once a contract goes pending, it's just, that's not a home that's available for consumers anymore. And we have record home price growth. And with that, we're seeing it actually in all MSA markets. This is a very, very unique aspect. This is very different than what we have seen in past years. In past years, we always said, oh yeah, Boston's hot, or Seattle's hot right now, or San Francisco's consistently hot, or New York City. But now we're seeing it everywhere. And I think that's the unique attribute of the environment that we're living in now. Now I'm going to take it low. I promise I'll bring it back higher, but I do think that it is important to talk about the uneven recovery that we're seeing right now. So we're hearing a lot about this K-shaped recovery. So those on the top of the K are the ones who are lucky, the ones who, like me, can bring their laptop home and are still gainfully employed and can remodel their homes. Those are on the top half of the K. Those at the bottom half of the K are the ones who maybe juggling childcare right now and not knowing what in the world you're going to do with little kids when daycare is closed or it's hybrid or it's just inconsistent. Or those who don't feel comfortable going back into their bar job or their dentist office, and they just don't feel comfortable right now from a vaccine perspective, or just not feeling okay having full-time hours right now, or just are not at full hours that they were pre-pandemic, regardless of the reason. And so when we look at that, we know that there's an uneven recovery, but that uneven recovery is also translating into housing. So I want to talk about some of those data points. Some of them have to do with race, so we're going to get uncomfortable for a second. I do want to bring it back up though, so we're going to stay here for a couple of seconds with a few slides and then move it on. All right, so when we look at homeownership by race, what we do know is that the gap has widened essentially over time. We have seen this gap this wide before. It was actually when the Fair Housing Act started in 1968 that we did see this gap of homeownership by race. This is essentially a 30-point spread between white homeownership rates and Black homeownership rates. There is a lot of historic reasons behind this, and those historic reasons have been quite persistent, and they still remain today. One of the many, many reasons that we do see behind this, and we have collected data on this, is looking at denial rates for mortgages. And what we do know is that African Americans apply for mortgages at half the rate of white Americans. And even among successful home buyers, those who did actually enter homeownership, we do see that the denial rate for Black African Americans is actually 2.5 times higher for them compared to white Caucasian home buyers. And these are successful home buyers. So we're not even counting all the folks who didn't apply for mortgages, who said, you know what, I just am not qualified for this process. I don't feel comfortable entering, or I've already been rejected, and so I'm not going to move forward in this process. We know that there's a lot of historical reasons, though. One of the many, many reasons that's out there is an artificial push to homeownership rate for buyers to actually go for subprime loans during the boom years. And then we did see that Black and Hispanic homeowners lost their homes at double the rate of white Caucasian homeowners during the bust years. And so that translates into lost wealth, it translates into lost knowledge, it translates into don't enter homeownership for future generations. And so we have seen that this has been quite persistent. And the reason I'm talking about this is because when we look at the jobs and when we look at that K-shaped recovery, at the bottom of that K, we do see more minorities. And so we do worry that that homeownership rate will just widen over time. And there's some big implications about why that matters. One of them is not just the home is where we're spending 24/7 or we had during the pandemic, but it's also because it's the major wealth building tool that we do have in the US. And when we look at homeowners, what we know is that they have more, just homeowners overall, regardless of your race, they have more than $250,000 in wealth. And in comparison, renters have just over $6,000 in wealth. Our wealth is usually tied to the home in the US because we are not good savers. We don't chalk money away like we should. And so we really do have our nest egg in our home. And when we look at this by race, what we do see here is that the gap has widened over time as well. So for whites in the US, what we do see is for white families, their net worth is nearly $190,000 compared to Black African American families, where their net worth is just $24,000 in the US. This is regardless of homeownership status, but this is an important takeaway that really our wealth is tied to our home when we do see that this is really mirroring that gap. And as we see home prices rise and that equity rise, we see this gap widen over time as well. All right, so I promised you I was going to take it back up. I want to talk about the changes that we're seeing in the last year, aside from that, and aside from that growing gap. We are seeing considerable changes in who the home buyers are and what they need out of their home. When we look at who the home buyers are today, what we know for sure is that they are wealthier. They have to be. They have to be wealthier to compete with those multiple bids offer situations, to compete with those escalation clauses, to be willing to pay all cash for homes, perhaps outside of a major metro area that they had been living in before, and they're buying at higher price points. When we look at homes that are more that were purchased that were more than $500,000, we know that that actually increased from the teens pre-pandemic to about a quarter of buyers purchased a home that was more than $500,000. That's an increase. We know that these buyers are likely to have dual incomes in their home. That doesn't necessarily mean they're married couples, and I'm going to touch on that, but it does mean that they have more income in their home, that they're just able to compete. The other thing that we're seeing today is that buyers are purchasing just for right now. We had seen the expected tenure, the expected time that they're going to own that home has increased, and it's increased from the Great Recession until right now. And what we do see is that that increase actually tipped back down for pandemic buyers because they're saying, I just need a home for right now. I don't know about the future. I don't know where the future is going to bring me, but I need a home that's going to fit my needs better right now. And maybe that's some encouraging sign for movement moving forward, because what we've seen is that tenure in home has increased to an all-time high of 10 years. It used to be that people moved every 7 years. Something in their life changed. You had a kid, you got married, you got divorced, you got a new job, something changed, and that was an impetus to move. But people have stayed put and they've really been pretty sticky in their home. And so seeing that potential for movement, at least, that could be pretty encouraging for the real estate market overall. The other trend that we're seeing here is that folks are feeling comfortable putting contracts down, buying a home sight unseen. Now, some of that I think could go by the wayside. We did see that happening early in the pandemic as people said, you know what, I don't want to jump on a plane. I'm buying this home farther away. I feel comfortable with my agent. I really trust my agent to really show me what's inside that home, to see this virtual tour, this virtual listing, this virtual open house, regardless, but then also to show me the neighborhood. What does the home smell like? What does the neighborhood sound like? Those are things that you can't necessarily pick up online, but you can rely on your agent to really walk you through and tell you about that. I am very curious to see where this number goes because there is an incredibly tight inventory in this country, these record lows that we haven't seen since the 1980s. But are people going to use virtual technology as a tool hand in hand with their agent to do this moving forward? Or is it something that'll go by the wayside because we have the vaccine now and we're good to go? I don't know, but this is going to be an interesting one to watch. The other thing that we're seeing hand in hand with this is that people are being very strategic about the homes that they're seeing. Now, this started early in the pandemic when you couldn't see homes in person, where there was restrictions, especially in the state of Pennsylvania, about what you could do real estate wise. So seeing them online was really kind of that bridge of making sure that this activity was still happening, but it was only online. People were saying, okay, what homes am I going to see in person? Once people stopped the stay-at-home orders and people could resume real estate activity, they were very strategic. Now I think people have bridged this over to there is no inventory. So let's be strategic about the homes we're seeing because there's really not a lot in your price point right now. So let's make sure that the homes that we're seeing, we're being smart about it so we can put a contract down immediately after seeing that because there's so much competition out there. This will be very interesting to see where this one goes too. All right, so let's talk about some other changes that we're seeing. One of the big things that we're seeing is that millennials are here. There has been a lot of fodder about they're coming. Yeah, they're here. They are 37% of all buyers today. That is the largest share of buyers, the plurality of buyers, however you want to say it, they are here. This is a very interesting dynamic. We know that younger millennials, based on this data, are actually having a lot of mom and dad's money to be able to enter the market. They have down payment help from mom and dad. Many of them are moving from mom and dad's house into homeownership. That's an interesting change. Older millennials, Gen Xers, older millennials have hit 40. Okay. They are not young kids anymore. There's all this fodder about geriatric millennials. That kind of kills me because I'm in that group. But sure, geriatric millennials, we'll go with that. And Gen Xers, they have high amounts of student loan debt. They often went to grad school too. So they're carrying that around. Gen Xers often not often, but a good share of them, the largest share of any generation, lost their homes during the Great Recession, and they're coming back into homeownership. Many of them were underwater if they didn't lose their home. And so they had to stall. They waited in their home for a long period of time. They're a little wary about entering the market. They might be a little slower in their decisions that they're making because they want to be strategic. They want to be smart about it. They know that if they're stuck in their home for a long period of time, what is the home that I can live in for an extended period of time that I didn't plan to? Boomers. Boomers have a lot of the household wealth in the US. They are the most likely to be sellers. They are the most likely to gain that equity and have that wealth in the US because they have held onto their homes for long periods of time. This creates, I don't want to say generational warfare, but it is going to create, if it has not already created some friction here, because the millennials are the ones who are buying the homes and the boomers are the ones selling them. So holding that wealth versus not holding the wealth and trying to get in and trying to compete in this market and be a first-time home buyer in this market, a very, very interesting proposition between these two generations. Silent generation still hanging on there, large share of them purchasing in senior housing and making these home purchases. The last thing I'll say about Gen Xers, they are really this forgotten generation between these two mammoth generations of millennials and boomers. For Gen Xers, something I think is very unique to this generation is that nearly 1 in 5, it's actually 18% of them, 18% are purchasing a multi-generational home. Instead of the boomer sandwich generation, Gen Xers are like the cool panini generation. I don't know, but they're taking care of their aging parents and aging older than 18 children, and they're all within this household together. And this increased dramatically during the pandemic. I think this is an interesting proposition. It means big financial implications for Gen Xers who are in this situation. It means a larger home needs to be purchased because they are purchasing this type of home. So let's talk a bit about multi-generational buying. This is a trend that did increase during the pandemic. It went from 11% pre-pandemic to 15% of all buyers are purchasing a multi-generational home. The biggest reason is for aging parents within that home. They needed a place to stay. Young adults or Gen Xers, they needed someone to actually take care of their kids. And so suddenly grandma and grandpa is moving into that home. We also saw that they were scared of COVID. They wanted their family member to be safer from COVID. And so suddenly that member is in that home as well, as opposed to a nursing home, assisted living, living independently, which could be quite lonely during this time. So we saw this great transition for aging parents to move in. This is some big implications for housing. One, survey research that we've done throughout the last year is suggesting that these aging parents are here to stay. They're not moving anywhere. They're not moving out. So this could be some big implications about how old that home is, the safety procedures in that home. Is there a bedroom on the first floor? Are there stairs, etc.? The other implication is that homes in the US are not good for aging in place. They just aren't. Our housing stock is old. We have narrow hallways. We have narrow doorways. What in the world is going to happen as those aging parents do need more help essentially within that home? The other big thing that we saw in big change is that people were pooling money for cost savings. They needed to pool their incomes to feel financially secure to buy this home together. And that's where we get into a very unique dynamic there. The other thing that we have seen is that there is the largest share of young adults at home since the Great Depression, truly since the Great Depression. And we saw these young adults at home, one, because they could be. They could move out of city centers where their jobs were, work remotely, be in mom and dad's home. The other thing that we saw is that schools went online or they went hybrid. And so we saw these post-secondary students move back into home or take a gap year. And then the other thing that we saw was job loss. And with these job losses, we saw a lot of young adults flock back home because they had to. All of these young adults now, I think we are seeing some start of perhaps some movement out of the home. Again, the roaring 20s are here. These young adults, if they were gainfully employed, were able to save money in the last year, or maybe they're heading back to school, or maybe they're being rehired somewhere else. That means a lot of movement, and that means a lot of demand in the housing market for those young adults who are able to save that cash and be able to move out. So it'll be very, very interesting to see what happens to that piece of the puzzle. All right. The other one, Birth rates. This has been a very big change. This is looking out at the US overall and what we have seen for birth rates in the US. When we look out at the US in the last century, so literally 100 years, what we do see is we have the lowest birth rates we have actually ever recorded. There are some massive implications for housing with that statement. There are massive implications for everything, tax, Social Security, who are we going to have taking care of us, etc. But as far as this goes, when we look at housing, this absolutely is mirrored by home buyers in the US. What we do see is that back in 1985, 58% of home buyers had a child in their home. Today, it's just 33%. This has some big implications for where do you need to be? Do schools matter to you? Are they ever going to matter to you? Maybe they won't. How big does your home need to be? Maybe you need a Zoom office, but you certainly don't need a child's bedroom. What neighborhood features are important to you? Resale, how quickly you're going to move out of that home because you need the elbow room. All of these are mattering to home buyers in a different way than they had in the past. That is some big implications, folks, when you're working with clients and really what does matter. All right. The other one, this is much lighter. Pets. Pets are crazy. Pets are booming. We have heard this in the last year. The cost of a dog up more than 150% in the last year. It's really, really skyrocketed to try and find a dog, adopt a dog, buy a dog. Huge industry was created of flying dogs across the country so people could actually purchase them. Very, very interesting implications there. And then cats. Cats have actually increased in cost of more than 40% in the last year. These are all my pets. I literally have 4 cats in this Airbnb right now. Technically, I have 3, 2 black cats. They look identical. I'm sure no one would know. Anyway, we do see that this is a big implication for housing right now. We see that where you live really matters if you have a pet. You want to be close to the dog park. You want to be close to the walking trails. You want to have wide windowsills for the cats or a catio, whatever is important to you for your pet. That is where people's attention has gone. The other change that we are seeing here for demographics, if we move back out again to that national scale, is what we have seen as birth rates have dropped, but marriage rates have dropped. When we look back at the 1960s, more than 70% of American adults were married. Today, just half of American adults are married. That has a big implication for housing on a number of scales. One, the size of the home you need is different. If you're a single adult, you need less space. If you are a single adult, you have less buying power because you have one income. And that is very, very important in this affordability crisis that we've seen today. What we do see is that single females, unfortunately, have dropped off. They used to be this huge force in the market, up to 27% of first-time home buyers. They've dropped off. They're at 19% right now. And a lot of that has to do with just affordability and buying power. But what we have seen on the flip side, unmarried couples and roommates purchasing homes together has increased dramatically. And we especially see this in the pandemic, and we especially see this among first-time home buyers. So that's a very interesting way that people are pooling their money and making sure that they can enter home ownership, take advantage of these low interest rates, but actually do so with 2 incomes. The other change that we're seeing here is for first-time home buyers. For first-time home buyers, that share has actually dropped to 31%. This is the lowest share we've recorded back to when there were double-digit interest rates. This, I think, is a very interesting transition that we have seen. And it's interesting for a number of reasons. One, the age of a first-time home buyer has increased. So that's an interesting change as well, because people need to save their money for a longer period of time where they're really struggling to find the right home with low inventory. But the other change that happened in the last year with the pandemic is that parents couldn't help as much. We used to see, and we had seen in recent years, about a third of first-time home buyers used mom and dad's cash for their down payment. That is a lot of first-time home buyers, about a third of them relying on mom and dad. Last year, it dropped to a quarter of first-time home buyers with a pandemic. So that's an interesting shift. Less parents could help out junior to purchase a home. They didn't necessarily feel comfortable tapping their own 401k or tapping their own retirement or taking cash out of their own house. to help their child enter homeownership. With that, we did see this drop in first-time homebuyers, along with the low inventory, student debt, the affordability crisis, all of these also being factors. But I think mom and dad's help and the retraction of that has been one of those aspects. But again, moving to one of the slides a few ago, mom and dad help in a different way too. If you're living at home, you're not paying rent. And so you could really chalk away a lot of money for your down payment that you may not have been able to before if you were paying rent. So I think we could see this first time home buyer shift and change. But the key here is we need inventory for these first time home buyers to be able to enter into the market. All right, student loan debt. What in the world's going on with it? It's at a 0% interest rate for federal student loans. You haven't had to pay your student loan debt in the last year. If you have federal student loans, automatically went into forbearance. That is a huge leg up if you took advantage of these programs. If you're gainfully employed and you had 0% interest rate, you really could tackle that student loan debt, especially if you weren't paying your rent and you went home to live with mom and dad. This has been, we don't know yet. I will say we don't know if these programs have helped for home buyers or not. What we do know is pre-pandemic, there was about a 7-year delay for those with student loan debt to be able to enter homeownership at all because they had to pay down this debt, save for a down payment, and get their debt to income ratio in check. It'll be very interesting moving forward to see if the alleviation that these debt holders had in the last year has helped them. We actually are going into a process of doing research on this to see if this has helped or not, but it will be interesting. All right. Last topic here, agent use. So I talked a lot about technology, and that makes folks nervous because what in the world's going to happen here with technology and agents? How is this all going to work? I will say there is extremely good news that we are getting back. Buyers want you, the sellers want you. You are in high demand. That is for sure. When we look at buyers' use of agents, it is near all-time highs. It's at 88% of all buyers are using an agent in the process. People don't feel comfortable just going through a builder's agent. They want representation, and people very much do not feel comfortable buying from a FSBO without agent representation. They absolutely want an agent by their side. We actually see this, and this is incredibly encouraging for the youngest generation of buyers out there. They use agents at higher rates than all other generations. I think that is very, very encouraging news. And it really does show how important having someone who will guide you through every aspect of the process and really help you navigate this home buying market that is very hard to find a home in. The other thing that I think is important here to remember is that first-time home buyers are first-time home buyers. They've never done this before. They need help. They don't know what they're doing. If they're moving from mom and dad's house, they haven't even rented in recent history. But the other thing to remember is that repeat buyers out there today have the longest time of ownership that we've had historically, that we've recorded at least. What that means is that essentially your repeat buyer today is a first-time home buyer. They don't know this market. They don't know what they're doing. They need your help. You are the expert, and they really do rely on you for that. On the selling side, what we do see is that sellers, agents are being used near all-time highs as well. 89% of sellers are using an agent during their process, and they want a full service agent. We actually ask a detailed question on this about the type of agent that could be used. Are you using someone who has a broad range of services, who's with you before that home is listed all the way to the closing table and beyond? And yes, that's the type of agent that is being used at the highest rate that we've seen in the last decade and what people do want to be using. I will say that's incredibly encouraging. The use of iBuyers, those iBuyer programs, just listing your home online and selling it over the internet, essentially, we see those at less than 1%. We collected data on this, but it's really, honestly, it's 0%. There's not many people who are taking advantage of these services because it's a huge price discount if you do it. Academic research suggests that it's about a 14 to 16% price discount, and people don't want to leave that kind of cash on the table. So people really just are not using these services. I will say this will be something that is very, very encouraging. And really what we do see is that sellers want their agent to sell within a specific time frame. to price their home appropriately. That's very hard to do right now, and to find a qualified buyer for their home. So really the bread and butter of what your job is, but also the other 200 steps that you're doing in that process for that seller behind the scenes. Um, so that's what I have for scripted remarks. I will say, as far as where we're going, things to watch for. Definitely vacation homes, vacation rentals. That market is hot right now. International travel may be opening up based on decisions, I think, yesterday by the EU to start admitting people back into the country if they want to, if they have the COVID shot. But there's a lot of people who may just feel more comfortable buying an Airbnb and renting it out for part of the time and then having it as their own place. It'll be a very interesting dynamic to watch. I think other things to watch for is, yes, birth rates have dropped. Yes, we have seen this dramatic decline, but how will schools come into play in the fall? What does this mean for parents? Does that school district, that's that top-notch perfect school district, is that still their top-notch perfect school district, or is it somewhere else now with the last year and the last experience that they've had? And I think some other things to watch are those features within that home. Are people going to want the same things that they had historically pre-pandemic, or some of the things here with some staying power, those extra bathrooms and bedrooms, the Zoom home office, because people are going to be working in a kind of hybrid setting moving forward. I think those are some things to keep an eye out for. If you're not following us on social, follow us, because we have a lot of great information and we post a lot of cool stuff on our blog, and we rerun it on social. So please do follow us along. All right. I am done with my scripted remarks. So thank you guys so much. I'm going to drink some coffee now too.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. This is great, great information. And I do have a couple questions, and if anybody has questions, please put it in the chat. Going back to the CEOs and the companies returning back to work. So in Philadelphia, that's going to be key. You know, we're seeing a lot, it's micro markets in Philadelphia. So some of the condos are struggling, but then the single family, they're moving. You know, they have the outdoor space people are looking for. People aren't comfortable yet sharing elevators, having somebody in their cars, parking it. So do you see anything in Philadelphia, you know, reflective of what you're reporting?
Yeah, I think that those are really interesting questions and big questions. I think the condo market, yes, it has been softer in the last year, but there's some indications right now that the condo market is picking back up, because first-time home buyers are looking at those opportunities and they're saying, oh, wow, I've been shut out of this market for a long period of time. Now I can suddenly get in and I can take advantage of this with these low interest rates and actually be able to enter this market. That's an interesting dynamic that we are seeing right now in really big metro areas, including yours. So that is interesting to watch. I think the other thing to watch here is what CEOs say. I think it's going to be hard. And, you know, I'm not talking from really a super informed place, but I will say it's going to be hard to get folks in 5 days a week, 9 to 5, when they've been remote for the last year. And so I think that this hybrid setting, at least maybe 2 days in the office, 3 days at home, or vice versa, I think that that could be here to stay. And with that, people might need that extra little office nook. If it's not even an entire office, they might need some dedicated workspace in their home. Because I think we all found in the last year, we do need a quiet place to actually do some Zooms and be on the phone.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see what happens with these big spaces. And are you seeing any difference in commercial? Do you take a look at that in the commercial space?
We do. We have two amazing commercial economists. I am not a commercial economist, but they are incredible. And they're actually putting out monthly reports now. I'm not going to commit them to weekly. They would kill me. No, monthly reports. And they're actually, I would highly, highly encourage anyone who's in the commercial space to look at the work they're doing. They're doing cool stuff on vacant motels, repurposing them into actual residential units. Another recent report that they did looked at ghost kitchens and the rise of ghost kitchens. We're all relying more on Uber Eats and food delivery services.
Oh,
So the restaurants don't even have an actual restaurant anymore. They're in this like vacant Kmart or something like that used
wow.
to be a storefront and it's now a restaurant space. So very, very cool spots of research that they're doing.
Ghost kitchen.
Yes.
That's a first. I've never heard that. But yeah, it does make sense. So, one other question I have, and then I'm going to go. I think there's a couple questions in the chat. The aging in place. Do you see that as part of the lack of inventory?
Yeah.
And
Okay. That's a big question. Okay.
sorry.
No, you're good. Okay. So I think it could be, so I'm going to answer this in like so many different answers because not everyone is different and everyone's choices are so independent. And I will say, I should have said at the beginning, I used really big caveats and really broad brush strokes of generations
Sure.
and generational trends, but everyone is so unique. For older generations, what we do see is, I think any generation honestly wants to age in place. We all want to just be as home as long as we can in our aging senior years and really be active as we possibly can. What we do see is for the oldest generations, even if they're moving, they're not downsizing in space anymore. They want the square footage that they had before. They want their grandkids to come. They want their families to be there. And so we do see that downsizing has kind of changed in that people don't downsize by square feet, they downsize by price. If they can find a more affordable area, that's important to them. The other thing that we're seeing is now these aging parents or in this home, these older adult relatives are in the home. And I think that's going to be an interesting dynamic too, because if they're in their family member's home, is there caregiving going on that's intergenerational? And do these homes need to be remodeled to actually accommodate folks who are in that home? Because the housing stock, according to Harvard, only 3% or 2% of the US housing stock is actually prepared for older adult relatives and for older people to age in place. And so I think that's going to be an interesting change as well.
Yeah. And the first time home buyers. That was an interesting stat that you gave us. Yeah, I'm concerned about them because they're the ones who kickstart the whole thing, and then that gets the move up buyers and then, the whole cycle starts. So, first time home buyers, how are are you seeing any more mortgage incentives for them? Any first time home buyer programs that are new since the pandemic?
Yeah, that's a good question too. So I know that there's some local programs in different states. I don't know off the top of my head if there's anything in Pennsylvania, but the Chicago area, for example, and Maryland, they have these programs where essentially they're helping take care of student loan debt if you buy a home there. And so it's a forgivable loan essentially that pays off a portion of your student loan debt. And they help you with your down payment even. The Chicago
Mhm.
one, it's actually pretty generous. Um, I don't know what's going to happen with first time home buyers moving forward, but I will say one of the massive gaps that is there is the knowledge gap of low down payment programs, even of knowing that you can just put 3% down with an FHA loan. Most first time buyers don't know that. They think that they
No.
need 10, 20% down. They're relying on mom and dad's knowledge from how long ago when they bought their home. So they just don't know about these programs that are out there. So I think informing them, letting them know, advertising really that HUD.gov is a great interactive website where you can go to your state and then your local county or city and see what programs are available. Because I think bridging that gap could be incredibly helpful for those buyers.
Yeah, I know Pennsylvania at PAR, we're working on legislation for first time home buyer program. I believe it is out of committee. I actually have a legislative meeting later on this afternoon, and I'll have an update on that. But yes, kind of works like a 529 where they can put it away, tax free when you take it out. But somehow it's tied to schools and buying in the state, but I'll have more information. But yeah, I think that's important for the younger generation, first time home buyers to understand. So it's the education component of it. Is there anything else that you wanted to touch on? Anything before I turn it over to Matt?
Um, I guess I would say, the inventory crisis is hitting everyone right now. I think it's making everyone's jobs in real estate very, very hard. There could be some movement moving forward, and I will say that the bright spots that we're seeing are the vaccinations. Because if you're an older adult and you thought about selling, you thought about downsizing by price or moving closer to the grandkids, you probably didn't want to in the last year because you felt uncomfortable with people coming into your home. So that could help. The other thing was that building repurposing. The commercial economists have done a lot of reports on this, even vacant malls and repurposing them into residential units. That could definitely be a bright spot that we could see. And then unfortunately, what we have seen is that some people have had to take advantage of forbearance programs, but some people may just decide that they want to sell their home because they don't feel comfortable making that payment anymore. They've had a job change. I will say that they do have equity in their home. This is not a distress sale, but they may need to move in with family temporarily, rent temporarily, and this could be a change that we see as well. So hopefully that inventory crisis that everyone is feeling so acutely right now, hopefully there'll be some alleviation soon.
Awesome. Okay, so my takeaway from this coffee talk, which was very informative, was it as agents helping our sellers take all the information that you gave us, what buyers are looking for, and maybe it's an older home or maybe it does not have a Zoom room, but use the imagination and create the Zoom room.
I love it. Yes.
So, so yes, that's very good. Thank you very much. It was such a pleasure having you on for Coffee Talk, and hope to see you real soon. And the report, the buyer seller report that comes out, is it in July? Do we do that in July?
So it's in fall, but we
Okay.
do a generational cut in March. It's free right now for Right Tools
Oh,
right
cool.
now. We usually charge for it. So absolutely, I'm going to send the slides and I'll send the link, but it's absolutely free right now. So absolutely take advantage of it.
Okay, great. All right, everybody, go check it out.
So
But
Jessica,
thank
will
you
you send
again.
that to me,
Yeah.
Jessica?
Yes, I
Okay.
absolutely will. Yeah.
Okay, so folks, we'll push that out to everybody, including the link to the recording of this session. So you'll have everything all in one little packet there. So sorry to interrupt you there, Stephanie.
No, no problem. Thank you again, Jessica, and
Thank
hope
you.
to see you real soon, maybe out in San Diego for the NAR conference, hopefully. All right, Matt, thanks.
Okay, so one last thing that ties in with what Stephanie was just talking about with the first-time homebuyer program. So as a piece of legislation moves through the legislature, there comes a very critical time of which you guys play a very critical role, and that is when we put out a call for action. So when that piece of legislation starts to move, folks, we need you guys to respond to that call for action, and it'll be really simple. A couple of clicks, maybe drop your name in there, and that will let legislators know, those who represent you out in Harrisburg, that you are a realtor and this is your voice being amplified as to this is what's good for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, the area that you live in, more localized, and it's good for our business. So it checks a whole bunch of boxes, but the most important thing is when we put out that call for action that you guys respond to it. And the second part of that is everybody within your circle, your friends and your family, let them know about it as well. So the more people that we can get to hear that push, the better chances that we have of Harrisburg responding to what's important to us and our industry. So with that, I'd like to thank Jessica. That was awesome. Thank you for coming in from your outpost in some Airbnb with an illegal cat. That was awesome. We won't tell anybody. We're all friends here. And Stephanie, thank you very much for Coffee Talk. Everybody, thanks for tuning in. We hope to see you Monday morning, 9 o'clock, Coffee Talk with PAR President Chris Rad. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.